If 90% of these contracts fail, the contract is designed to fail.
Landline now, welcome back. We are into the month of February, and that means it's time to talk about a new issue of Landline magazine. Managing editor Jamie Jones and senior editor Mark Schrimmer join me now. Thank you both for coming in.
Hey, you're welcome, Ashley.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Now, Jamie, I want to start with you and the editor's page, which you titled The Sound of Silence, which, great song.
Oh, it's an incredible song. And I love both versions, the Simon and Garfunkel and Disturbed. And it's just like, depending on my mood, is which one's going to get played on the playlist. So I don't know. And it's funny, you normally don't write about silence. You don't talk about it. You know, I mean, it's this weird thing that you don't realize the power that it carries until you really stop and think about it. And I know you and I talked about it a while back, because when I did the interview with Jimmy Mack, we talked about using silence in interviews strategically, you know, and you can let a really good point hit by letting that silence just hang there for a second, or you can make somebody squirm in their seat.
Which you guys did test out, and it feels uncomfortable.
It does.
Yeah.
You know, when you start hitting that 5, 6, 7 seconds, people start getting really uncomfortable. And it's a tactic that we use in interviews where we know that somebody's not being forthcoming with the truth. You know, you can use that as a true weapon. And so, you know, and again, we're talking about silence, nothing happening. And so, you know, I was just kind of, that's been in my head a lot lately. And then the one set of lyrics, people talking without speaking, people hearing without listening, you know, it just, that hits so hard, because I feel like that's kind of where we've landed in society.
Yeah.
You know, there's a whole lot of talking going on, but there's, you know, and you hear it, but people aren't listening to it. Oh my gosh, I haven't picked up the sign language sign for it. Anyway, but it's so important to realize that silence can be good or bad, and especially when you lay it on top of the advocacy efforts that, you know, OOIDA does, and all of the things that are going to happen with this new president, new administration. Silence is no longer a weapon. It's going to hurt you if you do not speak up, if you do not find your comfort zone in advocating for the things that we need. And this issue really kind of came together with a lot of big ticket things that, if some come into play, could be really good for truckers. Others we need to get rid of. And it's going to take pushing the agency, pushing this administration to move things forward, because they will get stuck at some point on this regulatory freeze. And we can't let that be the status quo necessarily, because there are things that need to be fixed. So, and I highlighted a couple on broker transparency and lease purchase, you know, as two examples of that.
And I know you both wrote about those. Mark, I'll start with you. You had an article about broker transparency efforts that were started years ago.
Yeah, and one of the things that I kind of wanted to do with this, because, you know, at that time we just obviously had that 60-day comment period that ended January 21st about broker transparency, but I wanted to kind of go back to somewhat of the beginning to show how much work and how much time it takes to even get a proposal like this out there. Obviously, the lack of broker transparency has been an issue for a long time. There are regulations that have been on the books since the early 1980s, and they haven't been enforced. But if you go back, this starts with kind of what Jamie's talking about, where truckers decided to not be silent back in May of 2020, and hundreds of them traveled to Washington, D.C. and decided to protest. And I think one of the things that was so powerful about that protest is a lot of times it's, even in the trucking industry, it's difficult to get, you know, one singular message out there. But they decided, instead of saying we're upset about this, this, and this, they focused on one thing. They decided broker transparency is the issue we want to talk about. And, you know, we have photos in the magazine with the signs on the truck saying things like, "We want broker transparency," we're the backbone, we won't be squeezed out. And those messages were very powerful. And they caught the attention of then President Donald Trump in his first term. And it set up a meeting with White House staff. And, it kind of got everything in motion. And OIDA was paying attention to this and knew that this was a perfect kind of moment to strike, even though this had been an issue that had been out there for a long time. Sometimes you need to wait. It's like that in football, you got that trick play, but when's the best time to call it and to use it? And they knew, okay, this is the time. So, shortly after that protest, OIDA files that petition for a broker transparency proposal to strengthen those regulations. And, here we were, all the way into 2025, and we're seeing that come to fruition. And luckily, as we know now, truckers weren't silent on that issue. Nearly 5,000 comments.
Yeah. And it just kind of goes to show the wheels of government move very slow.
But you can keep them moving.
Exactly.
And that's the whole point that we're making.
Yeah.
It's not a lot of fun to talk about this, and you definitely don't want to sound like you're preaching to people.
Yeah.
But you can only sit in the same filth for so long before you've got to say something about it. And that's really where we are with broker transparency. The regs are on the books. We just want them perfected and enforced. Mm-hmm. That's it. I mean, there's not a big ask here. Yeah. And so it should be easy for the administration to go ahead and pick up on those promises and what they were doing on it in the first term and move that ball across the finish line this time.
Now, Mark, you also touched on lease purchase agreements in this issue. Where are we with those, with these predatory lease purchase programs?
Yeah. So the Truck Leasing Task Force came together about a year and a half ago, and they started, they had a pretty, diverse panel. Some of them were owner-operators, some attorneys, people on kind of the leasing side that were a part of this task force.
We had no OIDA representative on there.
Yeah, definitely.
Jim Jefferson.
Yeah, and obviously he's somebody who has seen those complaints firsthand. So I think that there were some, varying opinions on this when they came in, but that year and a half, they started really analyzing the data, hearing from truck drivers and their experiences of people who had taken part in these lease purchase agreements, and started just hearing the hard numbers and data and how infrequently or uncommon it is for a truck driver to end up owning the truck at the end of one of these. I mean, more than 90% of these end up in default. I mean, that's staggering stuff. So where you have, you might have had a few like that sounded in those early meetings. I think these are good things, and they would say things like entrepreneurial spirit, if I can speak. But later on, you could see they were kind of changing, and everybody kind of came together on the task force and understood these are in a predatory manner, and they're being done in a way that favors the motor carrier, that is not, they're not trying to make an owner operator at the end of this. They are instead, these contracts are set up in a way where drivers are just going to get paid less for working as basically an employee. We've seen stats out of there that, drivers under these were making 20 cents a mile, where the average driver was making 70-some cents a mile. So it just shows you all they were doing was working for far cheaper. It also showed that there was a safety issue. Obviously, if you're not bringing in very much money, you might go, well, I'm going to try to keep these tires out a little bit longer. I can't do this maintenance thing right now. Maybe I'm going to, push to get there a little bit faster, even though I'm getting tired.
Fuel and go and tear through the parking lots. I mean, we've heard all the stories.
Yeah, and it's definitely an issue. And to get finally to your question, I know I was a little long-winded here, but but they came to an agreement of that their first recommendation is that this model should be banned and eliminated because, as they, we put in the headline, irredeemable tools of fraud and driver oppression. That's how strong of language they have against that. And I was writing in the magazine about the draft report, but that now has been made official. That is the first recommendation that the task force has had to Congress and to FMCSA, that we should eliminate this model.
I think the coolest thing about that task force, you were tied to all of the hearings and everything, and you always are kind of curious if these things are going to be a snoozer that you really have to muscle through and get those news tidbits out of. But when the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, they came in and took the gloves off. It was
100%.
That was impressive. And to have a group like that come in and be that adamant that this is one of the worst things that they've seen, not quoting directly, but it was very impressive.
Well, and to think that too, these are groups of people that have nothing to do with trucking. They just analyze contracts and those sort of things. And they walk into this and just seemed amazed. And like you said, some of the language that they had of Ryan Kelly of the CFPB, this quote always stands out to me when he was talking about, analyzing the results of these, and that more than 90% of these end up in default. He's like, that's not an accident. Like, if 90% of these contracts fail, the contract is designed to fail. Mm-hmm. And to me, that was so powerful. And I think it really opened up the eyes of a lot of the people on the task force when they heard those sorts of things. Because like I said, there was one driver who actually was one of the rare cases that successfully completed a lease purchase. And so she was like, well, I want people to have this chance that I had. But by the end of it, she was like, "Oh no, I
was one of the lucky ones."
Yeah, I was one of the rare things. I won the lottery, but that doesn't mean that everybody should be subject to this sort of program.
Another thing that was in this issue that I really liked was kind of an advocacy guide. Tell me more about that.
This is something we do some form of this every year, and it's always hard to come up with something that's really going to motivate people to reach out to lawmakers, especially when they feel like they're not being heard and when things aren't getting any better. And so right before this issue started getting planned and put together, we had the OOIDA Fall Board of Directors meeting. Fall Board of Directors meeting. Yes, I said that right. Anyway, and they started talking about the different ways that they're active in advocacy. And it's everything from serving on a task force to working with truck driving schools to be a mentor to new drivers coming into the industry, to working on county and local levels on commissions and advisory boards, for maybe put off a truck parking ban or things like that. And it was really kind of inspirational that they all found their own unique way to be an advocate. And that's where we really leapt off for this guide, is that there's not one way to be an advocate, to make change for your life. And you've just got to find your comfort zone, what fits it. I mean, you hate to make phone calls. You like to use chat. I know this.
This is true. Because if I can avoid a phone call, which doing what I do, I know sounds ridiculous, but I don't mind calling people for work. It's just more my personal life.
Yeah, but that's the thing. You would find a different way. You would use a chat function or email or something like that. And there's all of these options in there. And one of them that I think is really fun, Danny Schnautz mails magazines to his lawmaker. So you can read this, find something that fits you.
All right, wonderful. Thank you guys so much.
Hey, you're welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Our thanks to Jamie Jones and Mark Schrimmer of Landline Magazine. You can check out landline.media for the latest from the trucking industry. And if you have a news tip for us, you can contact us through our website or call 816-229-5791.